Hi folks, welcome to Just Off the Highway. I'm Prodgers. Now, I'm at one of the great old houses of early Johannesburg, originally built by the landlord Thomas Cullinan, he of the Cullinan Diamond. A building like this, it's so individual, it's so filled with personality that it deserves a name. It's called The View, and it overlooks not only Parktown, but nearly 130 years of history. Today, it's the home of the Transvaal Scottish Regimental Council and Association, and I want to show you a few special items that have earned a place of honor even in such a grand venue. Now this is the colour of the Transvaal Scottish. Great military units are awarded their own standard, which is called a colour, and each name on the colour is a battle honour to signify a major battle in which the regiment distinguished itself. This is the battle honour for the World War II Battle of Sidi Rezegh, where my story begins. Sidi Rezegh was a lonely desert airfield in Libya, situated near a tomb, and it became a graveyard for many brave men on the 23rd of November 1941. The battle itself was complex and confusing, highly mobile, motorized and mechanized units fighting it out in the desert. At that stage of the war, the Germans were besieging the town of Tobruk. The Allies sent a force to relieve it, and the 3rd Battalion of the Transvaal Scottish was part of that force. The two armies clashed at Sidi Rezegh in a complex, rolling series of engagements, mainly involving tanks and artillery. There was so much confusion caused by a lack of communication between different Allied units that it was almost impossible to tell whether the vehicles rushing through their positions belonged to own forces or perhaps even the enemy. Suddenly, from behind, a formidable force of German tanks attacked the position of the 3rd Transvaal Scottish. And they stood and they fought bravely against overwhelming odds. Barely able to dig in the rocky ground, infantry soldiers had only small arms against heavy armor. They fought until they ran out of ammunition. They stood no chance. The South African position was overwhelmed and the battalion was almost destroyed. Here are the names of the fallen on that day, amongst others, always remembered by the Transvaal Scottish. Of those who weren't killed, many were taken prisoner by the Germans, handed over to their Axis partners, the Italians, and taken to Benghazi, where they were held awaiting transport to POW camps in Italy. About 2,000 prisoners were loaded into an Italian cargo ship, the Sebastiano Venier. They were crowded into cargo holds and the hatches were battened down. The crossing of the Mediterranean Sea was very dangerous, so the ship's captain planned to sail the shortest possible route to Greece and then hug the coastline for safety until they could reach Italy. But there were Allied warships in the area, under orders to sink all enemy shipping, and the British submarine HMS Porpoise spotted the Sebastiano Venier. In a particularly cruel twist, it was later discovered that the top-secret British code-breaking station at Bletchley Park in England had intercepted messages about the Sebastiano Venier, including the information that she was carrying Allied prisoners. But, for reasons of secrecy, they decided not to inform the British submarine of the prisoners, and this decision doomed the Italian ship. On the 9th of December 1941, Porpoise fired torpedoes and struck the Sebastiano Venier. One prisoner, Private Jim O'Connell of New Zealand, described the mayhem. He said, "Suddenly all hell broke loose. a roaring sound in my ears, the side of the vessel gone as well as friends, watching water pour in through the great hole blown by the torpedo. Around me swirled the wreckage of all kinds, pieces of ship, pieces of human beings, some still screaming for help. Hundreds of men were killed instantly. Immediately, the Italian captain and his crew responded by abandoning ship and leaving the survivors, terribly wounded and trapped, to their fate in what everyone assumed was a sinking ship. But the ship didn't sink immediately. It drifted closer to the rocky coastline of Greece and eventually ran aground. It was in danger of breaking up or even being torpedoed again. Those who'd survived the attack seemed destined to drown. And in this pandemonium, one South African lance corporal, a member of the Transvaal Scottish, volunteered to swim to shore to carry a lifeline that men could hold on to get to safety. His name was Bernard Friedlander. He was a strong swimmer who would probably have been able to save himself, but he put his life on the line literally to save his comrades. He stripped down to his vest and underpants, jumped into the rough sea. It took Bernie Friedlander 90 minutes of superhuman effort to get that line to the rocks. And then he begged local Greek civilians to help secure it, and then drag a sturdier cable to support men trying to reach the shore from the stricken ship. He also fearlessly approached enemy soldiers to let him carry on trying to save lives. Thanks to his courage and persistence and devotion to others, and to that cable, around 1,600 men were saved. Years later, Bernie Friedlander would shrug when asked to tell his story and say, "There were dozens of chaps that did far more than I could ever have done. They should get the publicity, not me." His trials weren't even over. When he and other survivors were roughly marched away into captivity, all Bernie had to clothe himself was the underwear that he'd worn for his heroic swim. So this is what I wanted to show you. These humble documents, mailed to and from a prisoner of war camp where Bernard Friedlander and others were held until the war ended. Some bits and pieces, including a lucky charm given to Friedlander by some Italian peasants in 1944. They include a notification that he was not missing in action, but in a permanent POW camp. His family must have rejoiced at the news. In a separate collection, there's a telegram from his mother, which simply says, "Gratified to hear that you're well. All here send fondest love, Mother." As a parent, I keep trying to imagine sending those words, knowing that you can't say too much when the enemy was reading the mail. It's heartbreaking. Here are some postcards home from POWs. Each bit of mail was censored multiple times. Proof that a missing soldier's kit had been collected from the battlefield and sent home to his next of kin. Here's his cheerful letter home, always brave and positive. Luckily, Lance Corporal Bernard Friedlander survived the war. He returned to South Africa and settled down. In recognition of his actions, he was awarded the George Medal for gallantry. The decoration was pinned onto his chest by King George himself during his visit to South Africa in 1947. But there's another twist to this story. On the day of the shipwreck, Bernie Friedlander's conspicuous heroism was observed by an officer at the scene who was so impressed that he wrote to the authorities in Britain recommending him for a medal. The surprising detail was that the officer was German. He recognized courage even when it was on the other side. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Spike Becker for allowing me to film here at The View. And you can see this grand old mansion holds many stories. For me, the most powerful are the most human, like letters from a prisoner of war very far from home. I'd also like to thank Sean Culhane for his support and guidance, and acknowledge the late James Mitchell, who first told me this amazing story. As guardians of all this heritage, the Transvaal Scottish Regimental Council and Association would like to welcome you to experience it too. The View is available for functions like lunches and dinners and meetings or conferences. just contact them for details. And if you'd like to support Just Off the Highway, well, by now you know what I need and you know what you can do to help. See you further on up the road.